what do you think are three wealth building myths that people need to stop believing so they can actually do the work and get rich?
Okay, so the first one, which I think is the biggest one, is that income is more correlated with wealth than anything I've seen in the data. It's not how much you spend. It's not where you went to school. It's not, it's all about how much income you generate, right? And so the people with higher incomes, on average, save more than people with lower incomes, right? It's pretty odd for someone that has low income. This is a very obvious thing. Like, no, obviously, Nick, but if that was so obvious, then there wouldn't be so many people out there putting out this, oh, the reason you're not rich is you're spending too much on lattes and avocado toast and all this. And this is very popular in the financial media. But I just don't think the data supports it. That's probably the biggest one in terms of just pure wealth building. If we're talking about on the investment side, I think market timing is one of the biggest distractions you can ever have, which is like, oh, wait, save money to buy the dip. And like, just because that's worked a few times here or there, I think on average, if the time and energy and resources you spend trying to buy the dip will actually make you worse off than if you just buy every month and just spend your time doing something else. So that's another kind of big misconception is around market timing. And I think a lot of people get sucked into that. So whether they're, investors or not, they're always like trying to make moves all the time. And I think that is just a waste of your personal energy, but also a waste of, you're actually probably going to underperform. And I've written about that previously. In terms of another big wealth myth, let me think about this one. Cause I think that the earning one is the biggest one. I don't think spending. So I will talk a little bit about spending. You can spend more as you earn more. So there's a little bit of lifestyle creep that's okay. And it's actually shown in the data. Like generally, as people get higher incomes, they spend more money. This is true across the board. The difference is they tend to their spending increases at a slower rate than their income. So their spending as a percentage of their total income goes down. So even though their spending is going up, if their income is going up faster than their spending, then their spending rate, or you say, hey, I spend 20% of my income, I spend 50% of my income, whatever, that's going down. So I think another myth out there is that lifestyle creep's always bad. I don't think it is. I think it's really about how much, and we can get into like the numbers on like how much lifestyle creep you could have, et cetera. But I think that's another myth, which is related to spending in a way, but it's like, I think it's about changes over time. And these are real things that happen. You get a raise, you get a promotion, you crush it in a big project, you get, some money from that. You're like, what do I do with this money? Like, how much of this should I save and how much can I treat myself? That's the big question a lot of people have. And so, those are the types of things that I think are kind of misconceptions out there.
And I know like a big goal for people is to get to like $100,000 in net worth. Like, what do you think are the steps that people need to take if they're starting at zero to get to 100 grand?
Yeah. So, I'm coming out with a book, and it's called The Wealth Ladder. And in it, I break down wealth into these different, let's say, levels. The first wealth level, level one, is those with less than $10,000 in wealth. So that would be someone with zero or in debt, something like that. And the thing I say to focus on in level one is just like safety. You want to get to a spot where you have some sort of redundancy, whether that's financial redundancy or redundancy in your network, people that can help you out, so that if something bad happens, like you don't go into like a financial tailspin. So I'll give you a simple example. You have a car, your tire blows out. Okay. If you have no money to get that tire repaired, like you might have to take out debt, credit card debt or something to do that. And then, if you can't get it repaired, you don't even have a credit card. Now you can't get to work. You lose your job, right? You can see how this leads to a cycle that just gets people into a really bad spot. So the thing you need to do in like level one when you're at zero is just find a way to get to some sort of safety. And there's a lot of ways this can happen, right? You might have to rely on friends and family to get there. Obviously, you might have to work a second job or something just to save what you can, just to have enough so that if one of these bad luck events happens to you, it doesn't take you out of the game. That's the most important piece, is like keep playing, right? And so I think the thing, if you look at the data, what takes people out of the game and prevents them from building any wealth is like if they get caught in these like ongoing like financial distress events. Oh, I got behind on this and then that led to this and then that led to this. And so the most important thing is don't fall into that trap if you can. If you're already in there, like you're going to have to take even more extreme action to get out. Like I'm not someone that says, oh, you need to cut your spending. Like I've just talked about previously, it's all about income. But if you're in a really extreme situation, you may need to do something like that. I don't generally recommend it, but sometimes it's required. So in terms of like, okay, how do you get to 100K? First thing you want to do is you want to get to 10K. You have to get to some level where you have a few $1,000s in the bank account. Maybe you own a vehicle. Maybe um, you have an investment account. There's a lot of little things you can do. But then over time, the goal is for you to raise your income so you can start saving more, and then you'll eventually get to 100K. And it's not going to happen overnight. It takes many, many years of doing things before you can even see those types of results. That's another thing to keep in mind. Like, I've been writing online for 9 years. And the first 3 years, I made no money doing that. Now, of course, I had a full-time job, and I still do. I still have a 9 to 5 job, But on top of that, I've been doing stuff on the side, and slowly I built it up, and now it does make some income, which is nice. But it's not one of those things that's going to happen overnight. So please keep that in mind.
What are some of the like common ways for either people to increase their income that you've seen like work over time, or maybe even some of the best careers to get in where you've seen consistent like incremental raises in how much people make?
Historically, I would have said computer programming, but I think AI has changed that a bit. I still think it's a very valuable skill to be like a software developer engineer. I know those entry level jobs aren't really there anymore, but I'm telling you from experience, like I program a bit. I'm not like a full on software engineer, but like these LLMs, AI, whatever you want to call them, they're very good, but like you still need engineers to run these things because they make very silly mistakes that you're like, what the heck? Why would you do like? And when you actually use them, you'll realize this. And everyone's kind of probably experienced this at one point in some other domain, but it happens everywhere, even in programming. And so it's one of those things where that's a skill I would recommend, is like getting technical, learning how to do technical things usually pays. Another one is sales. Like at the end of the day, like sales can work across any industry. You might have to start selling somewhere on a lower margin product, but if you can sell well, like you can sell real estate, you can sell much more expensive items where you make more money. And so that's a skill that's always going to be useful. The other ones are just like you get credentialed in some way. So that means, lawyer, doctor, some sort of professional service thing. The problem with those, I love those careers. I think they're great. The problem with them is they're very expensive. And so generally you have to go deep into debt to get there. So before you consider those, make sure you really love it. You have some sort of skill there. You don't need to be the best ever, but you have to have some strength. If you're really struggling taking a legal course, like a standard intro legal course, that's probably not for you. So it's more about figuring out what are the skills that I have that I can then, you can also develop them as well. But if you already have some sort of strengths, like double down on your strengths. They always say, oh, you want to be well-rounded. Like most of the people that are very successful are not well-rounded. They are like very good at one particular thing. You can be pretty good at a few things and also do that. Like, I don't think I'm the best writer. I'm not the best programmer, but I'm good enough at both of those things that I can put them together in a way that the best programmers can't and the best writers can't, but I can do okay at both. Right. And so I think it's fine coming up with the combination of skills that can work for you.
Right. And speaking of AI and tech, like a side hustle that's become pretty popular over the last few years is Uber. Like, what do you think? Do you think that's a viable side hustle for people as far as making more income, or do you think there's anything else that people can do on the side that doesn't require a ton of skill to make extra money?
I mean, yeah, I think things like Uber, those are great. There's a lot of these like Fiverr. There's a bunch of different websites out there for freelancing. I think it's just tough because there's so much competition for that stuff. And some will say, well, Nick, isn't like AI going to be running all our cars eventually? I think eventually, but I think there's backlash. Even like right now, as we're talking, I'm recording this a little bit ahead of time, but like, there's riots in LA and Waymos, which are these automated cars that just come to you, right? Like people are calling Waymos there and just destroying them. So I'm telling you, that's going to set back like driverless cars a little bit because of this. And it's like, just things like this where people can take control of an AI system very easily in a way that they probably couldn't as easily take control of, or would be willing to take control of a human controlled system. So I think we're still a ways away from a lot of this stuff taking over everything, as everyone predicts. But in terms of skills, like, yeah, you got to just find ways to make money. And there's a lot of different things, and talk to people, talk to your network, like get out there and start talking to people. The more you learn about how people make money, the more you can be like, oh, maybe I could do something like that. That's another thing that I would say to keep in mind.
What are your like personal finance rules that you live by? And that if like somebody you cared about came to you and was like looking for some sort of blueprint, I mean, I understand you can't give specific financial advice, but people have like steps. People are like, have this much in emergency funds, have this much debt, put away this month every month to invest. Like, if you were to come up with some framework on your own, like what would that look like?
I mean, I think once again, I'm trying to bring it back to this idea of the wealth ladder, which is like there's these levels and steps, and my advice would change based on where you are on the ladder. So once again, we just talked about level 1, which is less than $10,000 in wealth. Level 2 is $10,000 to $100,000 in wealth, right? So like I would probably tell those people, okay, focus on your education, your earning capacity, and how you can kind of change the trajectory of your life, right? Someone in that area. That's probably, I'm guessing that like in every level, like, and so for the record, all these levels are just factors of 10. So it's like level 1 is less than 10,000. Level 2 is 10,000 to 100,000. Level 3 is 100,000 to a million, right? So I'm just multiplying by 10 for every level up through level 6. And each one of these levels, like the different things you do to get to the next level, I mean, they vary a bit, right? Like once if you're already in level 4, to get to level 5, or level 4 is 1 million to 10 million, to get to level 5, which is 10 million plus, like the things you have to do are very different than the things that got you into level 4, right? I think most people just good income, save over time, invest in the markets. You can get into, level 4, 1 million to 10 million. Obviously it takes a long time, but the things to get you into like 10 million plus is a completely different ballgame. You're talking business ownership, entrepreneurship, also some luck involved, among other things. So it's just something to keep in mind is like, if you're asking what are my like go-to rules or something, it really depends on where you start. And so like, my first book I wrote was called Just Keep Buying. And the idea there was like, buy investments. If I didn't know anything about you, I would say just like keep buying, a basket of income producing assets and do it over time and you'll build wealth. And I still believe that. That has not changed. That's a subset of the wealth ladder, but I don't think that's the right for everyone. I think it really matters on where you are. I don't think if someone came to me, hey, I have no money, I'm not going to say, hey, start buying income producing assets. Like they don't have income. They have a lot of other things they need to do before they can even use that advice. That's why I like this idea of like a ladder or like a step function as we go through different steps and things to do. So yeah, in terms of how would I answer your question, get to safety. So get some sort of emergency fund, right? After you have that, focus on your income. That's going to be the next big pillar that's going to kind of push you up through the different levels over time.
Yeah. And I think one of the underestimated tools is your network. I think I saw you make a post, I don't know if it was last week or a few weeks ago. Sometimes like on LinkedIn, it'll show posts from like a month ago and as if it was like new, but it was something like, I'd much rather have a friend I could call than like 3 months of expenses in the bank. It was something to that effect, to where like people need to also understand that if they have a strong network, you might not need to save as much cash because you could recover much quicker. I would love for you to kind of expand on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone should have financial redundancy in the emergency fund and all that, but I think a lot of people, especially when they're like, "Oh, I have no money," right? So I'm at this point where what do I do to get ahead? Like, I think a lot of people have a lot more wealth than they think. And I don't just mean financial wealth. Like you can have a network of friends, family, other people you can rely on. That is much more important than just money in a bank account. So something to keep in mind, something that I really try to focus on, especially for people who are just starting off, is like, how can you use your network to kind of improve your financial situation and then go from there?
Right. Um, and then, like when it comes to like debt, like what are your thoughts on like people who are very low on the totem pole with wealth? Like, should they take on debt to get a car, to invest in themselves, to pay for things, etc.?
I think it really depends. My recommendation is generally I'm usually against debt, especially for people in level 1 who are like just starting out, because once again, you can get into one of these holes that's really bad. There are exceptions to that. Like I think investing in the right education can be helpful, but it also depends like what is the education, how much you paying. Like if there's a free or cheaper program, I would recommend that. But that's kind of my way of looking at it.
Yeah. And I think success leaves clues. And I know you have different tiers to the book and the advice that you give. But do you think that somebody at this level 1 wealth building stage could adopt some of the habits from people that are like level 3, level 4, could to help them accelerate themselves up the ladder?
Yeah, I think once you have an income that's like you can save some money. I think once you're like saving some money, then yeah, the other habits are like, what are they doing with their money? Like if you look at people in level 1 compared to people in level 3 and level 4, like in terms of how they invest their money, like where's their money going? Like people in level 4, like over half of their assets are income producing. That's like stocks, bonds, real estate, etc. Right? in people in levels 1 to 3, like less than 25% of their assets on average are income producing, which means they're in things like a car or just cash in a bank account or their home, which I don't consider an income producing asset. It is an asset, but it doesn't produce income, right? So those three types of things, those are the types of assets that people lower on the wealth ladder own. And as you kind of move up the wealth ladder, you start to see that people own a lot more of, income producing assets, aka stocks, bonds, real estate, etc. So if I'm trying to, what are the habits of, if you want to like mimic the habits of someone wealthier, like start buying income producing assets. That is like the one thing I could tell you to do. And it's like the thing I've been trying to push for years now.
Yeah.
So
I think one of the problems with people when they're younger, and I speak from experience, is you're trying to like fast track, wealth building. And you're like, all right, like I just want to invest in a bunch of crypto because I want to get rich quick. And obviously, I think that costs people down the road if they're all invested in one thing. Like, what are some of the things you think somebody who's young should avoid when it comes to investing so they don't like just burn the extra cash they have to invest?
yeah, so I'm not necessarily against crypto. I think if you do it in a diversified way and you have a good approach to it, it can be fine. I think the problem is people go and try and buy these, oh, this coin's going to go up 10,000x overnight. Like they're trying to buy a lottery ticket. It's no different from gambling. I don't think Bitcoin is the same for a host of reasons, which we don't have to get into, but I do think like what happens is people are like, oh, you're making a bet. Let's be honest. You're making a bet. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you know you're making a bet, that's where you can, most of those people that did those things lost a lot of money. The only people that have actually consistently made money are basically Bitcoiners and a few early adopters of a few other coins, even people in Ethereum, which was considered like the tech on Ethereum was considered better than Bitcoin. And it is just basically been stagnant while Bitcoin's just, gone up. And so even people who were very smart, who were looking at the space, who were talking about all this stuff, could not have predicted that outcome, right? That outcome was not foreseeable ahead of time. So it's just something to keep in mind when you're doing this. Like, okay, you want to own some crypto, keep it as a smaller portion of your portfolio because it's so volatile, and then focus on assets that generally build wealth over time. And yes, it's going to take more time, but the median age of someone in level 4, that's $1 million to $10 million in net worth, the median age is 62. So like if you want to say, oh, well, like, oh, all I see is like 20-year-olds that are millionaires, like that is incredibly rare. Like less than 1% of people in level 4 are under 30. Like less than 1%. If you're seeing that, you're seeing an outlier. And once again, what you see on social media is not showing someone's bank statement. It just shows someone rented a Ferrari for 2 hours or something. Like that's another piece of this, is how much of this is even real. Like real people that have wealth aren't doing stuff like that. There are some that actually are really rich and they like supercars and they do that, and that's fine. But most people doing that, especially young people, don't really have a lot of that wealth. And so it's another mirage and thing there. So it's something to keep in mind. And the book talks about this. In chapter 10, I talk about, well, how long does it really take to build wealth, and like looking through the data and how, if you're starting this wealth level, what's the probability you get to that wealth level over a 10 or 20 year period, right? And something like that is really the way to like view these types of things.
Yeah. What's the saying? You might know it better than me, but it's like young people buy things to make them look rich, and old like people who are actually rich buy things that make them not look rich, or something like that. Like, I know Buffett like drove the same car forever or something, right? Like,
yeah, but he does have a private jet, so I guess pluses and minuses, right? So no, I generally think like, most wealthy people aren't trying to flaunt their wealth for obvious reasons. It's actually, you don't want to like advertise that. At the same time, like, if you have a private jet, like you're wealthy, there's no way to get around that. So
I've seen you post countless times about the amount of wealth that you have now. Like most of it came from like the early days of investing. Like talk about why people who are young should care about investing early and how that can pay off long term.
yeah, and this is what I talked about in level 3 of the wealth ladder in the actual book. So when I'm discussing that chapter, I basically say, hey, let's say you're getting 7% a year and you're saving the same amount of money every single year, right? You do this, you save the same amount of money every year, and you do this for 40 years, right? By the end of your journey, over half of the final portfolio value will have come from the first 10 years of contributions. Dang. So the first 10 years, just because of the constant, remember, this assumes a constant rate of compounding. The first 10 years builds half the final value. The next 30, it's like the work is disproportionate, like the work you put in the first 10 years is more important than the work you put, or is slightly more important than the work you put in the next 30 years, right? So that's the beauty of compounding, is like you start building that thing up. And it's okay if you miss those first few years, because if you start earning a higher income and you contribute to the account, all that matters is the amount in the account. It doesn't matter like, oh, if someone could start earlier than me, but if they don't save a lot of money, like I could start way later. As long as I surpass their account value at some point, like just by putting more into the account, I will still outgrow them, all else equal. So it's not the time matters, but it only matters because of the ability to just keep this thing going for a long time. So in terms of, the importance of starting early, like that's obviously there, but not everyone can start early. And so if you get a late start, there's a few things you can do. The thing I actually recommend is to exercise more. I know it's a very weird, like, what? How is that? Why? How does that make sense? But I think exercising more is a way for you to extend your lifespan, which is good for you regardless. But also by extending your lifespan, you can extend your quote work span. So you can work longer. So if you were normally going to retire at 65, maybe you'll retire at 70 or maybe even 75, right? So you can work longer so you can save more and make up for that period when you couldn't save money. So it's another way of looking at this idea. And I think it's probably a better approach for most people than to say, oh, you know what, just do catch up contributions when you're 55. Like that's fine and all, but I think the better approach is to, hey, you're going to have to work more. Like you didn't save anything, that's fine. But now like the cost of that is you have to work more on the tail end. And so get healthy so you can do that. That's my argument.
And have you found, like, generally speaking, there to be any good resources for people that maybe don't have a financial advisor or don't have access to a planner or something that they can get advice on, like how to like put together like a well diversified portfolio or interest, the best like savings account? Like, is there a resource you would point them to?
I mean, there's a lot of different resources. I would say just do research on the internet, like read, if you like my stuff, read the bloggers I point to or other people's work. Like there's so many different good books out there. Like for example, if we're talking about budgeting, I'd be like, oh, read Get Good with Money by Tiffany Alici. If we're talking about asset allocation, I would say read The Intelligent Asset Allocator by William Bernstein, right? So I could give you recs and stuff, but like I think a lot of it is just doing the research. Like once you start reading and going out there and reading the stuff, you're going to hear about this person, hear about that person, and you'll naturally start to pick up on what people are gravitating to and what makes sense. And then from there, you can just, do the rest. I think it takes time. You have to spend a little bit of time learning this stuff. You don't have to be an expert. Like I spend a lot of time like learning about health stuff. I wouldn't consider myself a health expert when I put out like all my health stuff, but I feel like I know enough that I'm informed enough that I can understand when something's a good idea or not. Right. And so I think that you need to get to that level of understanding.
There was a concept in the book that you essentially, it was like the title, I think, of like level 4, and it was talking about, and in level 3 is 100 grand to $1 million, if I remember correctly. And you said like what got you here won't get you there when it comes to, I believe it's like 1 million to 10 million. Like I would love for you to talk in depth about that and what it actually takes to go from being somebody who's a millionaire to somebody who has like a sick amount of money in 10 million.
Yeah, let's say 10 million plus, right? And so the math on that and what got you here won't get you there is actually it was a business book that came out. It was about like how you have to change your strategy as a business person, right? And I actually love that idea, and I just applied it to wealth making. And so in this case, let me just give you some simple math. Let's say you made it to $1 million. Like today, you have $1 million in net worth, and let's say your net worth growing at 5% a year. I think that's a conservative annual return, right? We'll just assume that's inflation adjusted, so that's actually pretty good. So let's just assume 5% a year, it's growing. And let's also assume you're saving $100,000 a year. That's a lot of money to save. This is after tax money, right? So I'm now making a lot of assumptions. Even with all these assumptions, if you were doing that, it would take you 23 years before you made it to $10 million. So remember, this is after you already make it to $1 million. So you have to work all that time to get there. Then you also have a high enough income to save $100K a year, and you're earning 5%, right? So all these big assumptions, and it still takes you 23 years. You're like, well, Nick, what happens if you save more? Okay, let's say you're saving $300,000 a year. It would still take you 17 years. Remember, $300,000 after tax. It would take you 17 years to get to 10 million. So what's my point of all this math? Once you get to into the level 4, $1 to $10 million, your job is just simply not going to make as much of an impact on your wealth anymore. And so I saw this tweet recently. It was kind of funny. It's like, if your investment portfolio earns more than you do, is your job a side hustle? And it's like kind of a joke, but it's kind of true in some sense. And when you do the math on this stuff, I call level 4 like the no man's land of wealth, because once you get in there, like you're basically not going to get out. Like you're trapped in there the rest of your life. I don't think that's a bad thing. I'm like, oh my God, poor me. I only have $5 million. Like, no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying if you really want to get to like 10 million plus, the strategy you need to use is very different to get to 10 million plus than what you do to get to 1 to 10 million. And so, as I said, to get to 1 to 10 million, you can have a good income, good savings, invest and just wait and time, and then you'll get there, right? The median age in there is 62. For those trying to get to 10 million plus, you have to do something very different, which means you probably have to either join a startup early and get a bunch of equity, and then that startup has to sell for a lot of money, or you have to start your own business, and then that has to sell for a decent amount of money. And when I say decent, like you're talking in like, the 2-digit millions versus like, oh, I could be at a company that sells for $100 million. And if I get in early enough, I could, get my 20, 30 million, et cetera, whatever out of there. So that's the difference. It's like the tactics to get to 10 million plus, are the things you need to do are very different than the things you need to do to get to 1 to 10 million. And so that's where I'm coming from when I say that. I talk about all this math and everything, because at some point your salary is not going to make as much of a dent in your wealth as it used to. And so you're kind of in like this, okay, I'm just going to be in level 4, and that's fine.
Right. Yeah, I had Mr. Wonderful on the pod not too long ago, and we were talking about like the fastest way to build wealth is to like sell a company, like build and sell a company. I mean, he sold his company to Mattel for like 4 billion, the learning company. And I got some like pushback in the comments being like, not everybody can do that. But it's like his point was like in the context of like simplicity, if you can sell a company for a silly amount of money, like that's way a much shorter path than like what you just said, having to save like a couple $100,000 a year for like 20 something years. I would love to hear like your thoughts on what Kevin O'Leary said.
Well, no, he's right. It is faster, but also to defend the commenters, like it's much harder. Like there's a reason why there are so few people, just for the record, to give you some stats, like in terms of the wealth levels. So about 20% of the US is in level 1, that's less than 10,000. Around 20% is in level 2, that's 100K to, or I'm sorry, that's 10,000 to 100,000. 40% is in level 3, that's 100,000 to $1 million. 18% is in level 4, that's 1 to 10 million. And the top 2% is split amongst level 5 and 6, mostly in level 5, obviously. So to Kevin O'Leary's point, like, yeah, it's much faster, but once again, you have to end up being in the top 2% of the US basically to get to that, right? You have to be very skilled at something, and you have to sell a business, and maybe you have to get a little lucky too. There's a lot of things that have to kind of align, right? And so you can imagine you have this great business idea. I bet someone had a great business idea, and then COVID hit and their business went under because it wasn't prepared for this unknowable event, right? So there's plenty of examples of things like that where, yeah, it is faster, but it's much harder. And if you want to read a good book that kind of talks about some of that math, is, Millionaire Fastlane by MJ DeMarco. He talks about that. He's like, yeah, you can get there faster and you can build a lot more wealth, but it's much harder to do. Like business ownership and running it, every single thing I've read on business ownership says it's very difficult, and most people don't recommend it.
Do you think that people hit a million and they just kind of just coast and they just limit themselves from actually building more wealth?
I wouldn't say that they limit themselves. I do agree with your contention. It's like at some point you say, okay, where's enough? And then what a lot of people do is what is commonly called Coastfire, which is like, hey, I've saved enough where I don't necessarily have to work anymore. As long as I can just get myself to retirement, I'm good. And so they will coast. So I think a lot of people rationally take their foot off the gas once they get to 1 to 10 million. And I think it's the same thing. Like I have no inclinations to get to 10 million plus. And so I'm like, I'm not going to go and like really just, work super, super hard to get there, because I don't think the benefits are worth it. Like, yes, you can buy slightly fancier things, but I don't care about supercars. Flying private, I would need to get far past 10 million. I think the stats show you need the typical person who flies private has about $20 million in net worth, and their annual income is around 2 million. So one or the other. If you have $2 million in annual income or $20 million in net worth, you can fly private semi-regularly. I don't have either of those. I don't expect to have either of those. So I'm not going to be flying private. I don't care about that much. So outside of that, there's not many other things I'm like, oh my God, I need that. Like it would be not, real estate's obviously one thing. I'm a renter now. I may be a renter for the foreseeable future, but that's the only other thing that might change in my life would be real estate. Like that's the only thing I would be buying with my money if I were, in level 5 versus level 4, et cetera. So
Did I hear you say when we first connected that you don't have a car? Is that true?
I still don't have a car. Yep, I'm 35 years old, still no car. But I've lived in a city. Right? I lived in San Francisco, Boston, New York City. Between the public transit and Uber and the rise of Uber and Lyft, like I don't need it. And if you actually just look at the annual car cost, and it's only because I live in a city, I pay for it in rent and other things that I pay for basically to offset the car cost. But like the annual car cost, I spend way less than even the cheapest car, like annual maintenance on just Uber and Lyft. Like, and I mostly use public transit, so I don't even use that. So yeah.
I think a lot of times people they over obsess about money. And what I mean by that is they check their bank accounts every single day and more like in an obsessive, like, oh my gosh, like how much do I have? Or they put so much money in the bank or an investment that they don't enjoy life. I know you like to enjoy. I mean, I think the last time you love like going out to nice places, you love experiences. Like I love that stuff too. Like how can somebody have like a happy medium where they're like, not being an idiot with their money, but they're also not like killing themselves by just being super, super, super cheap because they're afraid of not having anything when they're 65 or whatever.
Yeah, so actually, I spoke about this in the wealth ladder. I came up with a rule called the 0.01% rule. And what this rule does in every wealth level, there's like a level of spending freedom, as I call it. But how the rule works, you take your net worth and you multiply by 0.01%. So 0.0001, or just divide by 10,000. That's also really simple. So, for example, if you have a net worth of $100,000, that when you divide by 10,000, that gives you a number 10, right? $10. So what I say with the 0.01% rule is you can spend $10 a day extra on just whatever you want and have no guilt about it. So what I say in terms of like spending freedom, level 3, which is 100,000 to $1 million in wealth, that's what I call restaurant freedom. And why do I say that? Because the difference between the cheapest item and the most expensive item on a menu is going to be somewhere between $10 and like probably $100 when you go to a restaurant, right? So the rule fits with the spending category, right? So level 2, $10,000 to $100,000 in wealth, corresponds with $1 to $10 in that extra spending freedom, which I call grocery freedom. So level 2 is grocery freedom. Level 3 is restaurant freedom. Level 4 is travel freedom, right? That's where you can start spending more to upgrade your seat, to, stay in a nicer hotel, etc. And so the thinking behind this is like, as you go through the levels, this gives you permission to spend more in certain categories. It doesn't give you like, I'm in level 4 now, but I don't go and like upgrade my seat very often. Once in a while I will, but very rarely. Like when I was in level 3, I never did. I always flew coach every single time because I was like, I haven't built enough wealth to earn that like lifestyle creep, basically. And so the reasoning behind this, why this works so well, is because your wealth on average, I assume, grows by 0.01% per day, which is 3.7% per year. It's a relatively conservative return. So if we assume that, you can spend whatever your wealth kind of throws off, aka that return daily, and your wealth would stay constant. So it's just another way of thinking about this process that kind of allows you to splurge without obsessing. And so what I think should happen is, as you go through the different wealth levels, you should give yourself some mental freedom to spend more. And it's like, it's okay. Like I can spend, when you go to the grocery store, okay, I can buy the nicer eggs. Or, when I'm at a restaurant, okay, I can buy, the salmon for $35 instead of the burger for 25 or whatever. I'm just making up numbers here, but you get the point. Like the idea is to build this mental freedom into something that also allows you to kind of stay disciplined. Because if you never make it out of level 3, then sorry, you got to be flying coach, right? That's like how I was looking at it. And so I'm going to be flying coach until I'm like deep into level 4, and then I would regularly be, buying a business class seat. So that's kind of my thinking.
Where do you think I should be at if I'm like 37, about to be 38, like on average, like based on the stats, like as far as net worth?
Oh, okay. This is a great question. So let me actually, I'll just look at the numbers real quick. Level 3, the median age in level 3 is 54. So someone with 100K to a million, if you took all the households in the United States, put them in that had 100K to a million, put them in a room, the middle age would be 54, right? The 10th percentile age, which is basically the earliest, youngest people in that room, would be 32. The 25th percentile age would be 40. So you're doing quite well, you're like in the top 25% if you're under 40 and you're in level 3, right? That's what it says, right? So of those people, you're in the top 25%, right? In terms of level, once you make it to level 4, right, to be in the top 25%, you'd probably be, someone would have to be younger than 51, right? So between now, if you hit level 4 before 51, you're still in the top 25%. If you hit level 4 before 43, then you're in the top 10%, right? So this is all just included in a table in the book in chapter 10, but it goes through all these different ages and kind of how, and it looks at other stuff as well, but it just lets you know, like, hey, like, how rare is it to be this old and have this much wealth, basically. So
What do you think of like the die with zero method? Like, do you think that there's merit to that, or do you think that do you think it's only applicable for people who are like uber wealthy?
I wouldn't say uber wealthy. I think you have to be level 3, level 4 before you can really like take those types of risk. I think if you're in level 2, it's tough to be like die with zero, because like any one thing, like your wealth is just, especially if you're in the United States, if you're in level 2, which is $10,000 to $100,000, and you have some weird health outcomes, some that you couldn't have predicted, you could use Medicaid and stuff like that, but it might, you might need that wealth. So I would not say die with zero is great for someone in level 2. I think level 3 and level 4, it's fine. And I don't think die with zero is actually correct, but I think it's directionally correct. So I wouldn't say die with zero, but I'd say die closer to zero, I think is the correct answer. I think trying to actually die with zero is very risky for a host of reasons. No one's going to actually try that. But I think Perkins is directionally correct. And I think his book is a positive force in the world, because I think right now there are so many people who are older, sitting on lots of money, and they're not spending it. And so if that means they're going to help out their children or their grandchildren or something, that this is the time to do it, right? People are getting older and wealthier than ever before. And so I'm generally a fan of like die with closer to zero. So,
And I think I have, is it on? No, it's somewhere else. I was going to say, I have like Morgan Housel's book, Psychology of Money, somewhere around here, which I'm a big fan of his work. And, he talks about like, the psychology of money, having a better relationship with that. Like, I know a lot of times the reason that people don't accumulate well, oh, it's actually underneath my computer to help prop the computer up. But anyway, it's because they have a bad relationship with money. Their spending habits are just complete crap, and they just, whenever they get a paycheck, they spend everything. Because have you ever had a time in your life where you've had, an unhealthy relationship with money? And if so, how'd you correct it? Or have you found like some good habits for people to instill to make sure that they can like better their relationship with how they perceive like cash flow?
I wouldn't say I've ever had an unhealthy relationship with money, but I've definitely, my relationship with money has changed. But I think it's also because like it's changed over time because I've actually built wealth. And so like when I was 22, 23, I was very, very frugal, and I was, I didn't spend as much on a lot of things. And that's fine because you don't have a lot of money, so you don't spend a lot. I mean, it makes sense. I wouldn't say that's unhealthy. I think it's very a natural thing when you don't have a lot of money to not spend a lot, because like you don't want to get into a bad place. But looking back now, I was probably a little too conservative. I was like, I'd be at a music festival and I would sneak alcohol in through my pockets versus paying the $9 for a beer. Cause I was like, a beer shouldn't be $9. It should be like $5 or something. Right. And so, but that was festival prices in 2012. And now the beers are probably like 15 to $20 now. Right. But my point stands, which is like, I did things to save money back then that like probably were like a little bit overkill, but that's when you're young and you're in your 20s, you kind of do stuff like that.
Right. And then, like, I know you talk about like these different levels, and as it comes to building wealth and how you can have some lifestyle creep as you like accelerate up the ladder, if you will. Um, like, what are some of the dangers of people not like reevaluating their financial plan as they're like climbing this ladder?
I think you just get trapped in your old habits. And I think without reevaluating consistently, you'll just follow your old habits. And that's why I think it's very difficult for retirees to spend money, because they were so good at saving for so long, and then to flip that switch and go to being a spender, it's very difficult. And so you can be so in your habits that you just never flip the switch, right? And you can't enjoy your life as much. And so that's the thing I like to think about, whether that's like a more extreme example, because that's a retiree who's kind of at near the end of their money journey. But I think it's the same is true with like, people could be making really good money and then just not change anything. And that's fine because you'll save more money, but like, what's the purpose? Why are we doing all this? Why are we, you listening to this podcast? Because, why are you trying to build wealth? Because you're, want to invest for the future, right? The whole point of this, like the whole point of investing is like, okay, I'm giving up consumption today to, in theory, in hopes to have more consumption in the future, right? And so if you're not doing that, then what's the point, right? And I think a lot of people invest, save, work hard, all that stuff to generate the money, and then they don't really end up using it, which is like why Die with Zero is such a good book philosophically, because it's like, hey, wake up, why did you do this? What was the point?
Didn't one of your posts say that like retirees, generally speaking, have more of a they don't spend enough versus saving enough or something like that?
It depends. I think so. If we're including all retirees, that's not true, because like 40% of retirees don't even have a portfolio. But among retirees with an investment portfolio, so if we conditional on people who've actually save money over time and have more than just Social Security, then yes, those people generally aren't spending whatever enough means, but they literally just spend whatever their investment portfolio throws off. They almost never touch the principal. And so does that mean that they're not spending enough? We can get into debates about that, but they're never going to run out of money, basically, right? And so what ends up happening is they die and they pass on that money to their heirs, which is fine if that's what they want, but like they just don't end up spending anywhere near to what they could be spending.
Right. And do you find that people, generally speaking, who have a portfolio in retirement, like carry out the things that you think you're going to do when you're like 30, like travel a bunch, have a second home, or are they kind of just still doing the same thing?
It depends. I don't know. I haven't seen too much data on that. I know there's stuff out there, studies on this stuff. I haven't seen too much, so I can't answer it that well. But I think every person's different. Like I know retirees that haven't done anything with their money, and I know those that have like really hit it hard and like, yeah, we're using our money. We're going on 3-4 cruises a year. We're doing this, we're doing that. They're super active. And so every personality is going to be different. But I think it's more to do with, once again, your individual characteristics than how much money you have. There's two people could have the same amount of money in retirement and live very different lifestyles.
Right. I'm sure I think you're friends with Sahil Bloom, he's been on the pod a couple of times. Friend of mine, wrote a book about different forms of wealth. And I think it's along the same lines of some of the stuff you talk about, and focusing on your fitness, focusing on your relationships. Like, what have you found to be like the areas of wealth that you think people really should prioritize as they're getting older that can actually allow them to enjoy their financial freedom more?
Yeah, I think health's a big one. And it's funny. So I actually collaborated with Sahil on 5 types of wealth. He asked for help with the financial piece, and financial wealth is one of the 5 types. And so I helped him with that. And then funny enough, in my new book coming out, I use his framework when thinking about the other types. I talk about financial wealth for most of the book. My book, The Wealth Ladder, is about financial stuff, right? It's the nature of it. That's why you're buying the book, right? Why people who buy the book, why they want it. But at the end, I talk about those other types of wealth, which is social wealth, mental wealth, physical wealth, which is like your health, basically, and then time wealth. And so we kind of get into those things, which it's like a miniature version. If I had to write 5 types of wealth, here's what I would have written. I just do it in one chapter instead of doing a whole book, right? So that's kind of my take on it. I think those things are all incredibly important. I think health's probably the highest of those, because that's the thing where, in retirement, just naturally your body is declining, and so what you can do to slow or offset that is great. And I think it's just beneficial for the most part. So
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of talk right now about longevity. Longevity means quality of life versus just quantity. Like, you want to be able to like enjoy like your last 10, 15, 20 years on earth, instead of like just hobbling around because you haven't been taking care of your health.
exactly, and that's why I think the health stuff matters a lot more than people think. And I think we're going to start seeing more of that going forward. I also think as more wealth is being built, and I'm just saying this in general of American society, I'm not saying this about any individual. I'm just saying what I'm seeing in the data is like in inflation adjusted terms, there's more people that are wealthier than ever. Like 18% of US households are in level 4 or above, right? So like that's a lot of households when you think about it, right? If you say, okay, if there's there's 100 million households in the US, that's 18 million households, right? And there's actually more than 100 million. So it's like, you get my point. Like there are 18 million millionaires in the United States, at least, right? So it's like, that goes to show, like, as this is happening, guess what? There's a lot of money, but there's only so many experiences and things you can do. At some point, like, there's gonna be a big shift in focus to all the things you can't buy. And so I think that's where health, social stuff, all that's gonna just, I think, be even more important in the future as people continue to build wealth as a society, at least. So
A couple hot takes I'd love for you to expand on. You talked about that you rent and that you didn't buy a home. Like, over time, what's the data say about renting versus owning when it comes to real estate?
it's all, I mean, I wish, and this is not a cop out, I'm being very honest here. I made a rent versus buy calculator. It's on my website, dollarsanddata.com. You can just find the calculators there. And it's all based on the input. So it's all based on the relative difference between what's the rent you're paying now, what's the home price, what's the interest rate like, and then also what's your expectations about future inflation. And that's probably the most important one that people overlook. So everyone's like, oh, just run the numbers on rent versus buy. Like, running the numbers on rent versus buy means coming up with some estimated, assumption about future inflation. And that matters so much, because if you think inflation is going to be super high, you should buy a home right now. If you think inflation is going to be high, take out as much debt as you can and buy a home. Of course, I'm not recommending taking a lot of debt, but if you knew with certainty inflation would be high, why? Because with inflation, all that debt is going to be devalued, basically. It's going to be like worthless. So you can take out $1 million loan, and then if inflation's super high, guess what? Assuming your income moves with inflation, et cetera, you're going to be able to pay off that home with really cheap dollars, basically. So that's why inflation is so important in this calculation. And so the truth is, no one knows. Everyone's like, oh, renting was better than buying here or there. No one knows until after the 30-year period is over. And I say 30 years because we're assuming you took out a 30-year fixed rate mortgage. So we can make assumptions and guesses, but no one truly knows until the 30 years is over, right? Imagine right now we start getting tons of deflation. Like, people with mortgages and debt, that would be bad for everybody, but people with mortgages and debt would be in a really tough spot, because now their dollar is becoming worth more over time, and they're like having to use it to like buy into their mortgage, right? So that hasn't happened historically, and I doubt that's going to happen, but it's something to keep in mind. If it were to happen, then yeah, that could be a problem.
What about money buying happiness? What's the data say on that?
Overall, if you're already happy, so this is the condition. If you're already happy, more money buys more happiness. That's been shown in the data. That's this new research which just came out through Killingsworth. He looked at that original study, which said, okay, after $75,000 in income, you don't get any happier. They looked into the data a bit more, and it wasn't measuring what we thought it was measuring. It was measuring unhappiness. So once you have over 75K a year in income, that doesn't prevent unhappiness. I know it's kind of two double negatives, kind of weird to think like that, but basically, like, I don't care how much money you make. Once you're making over 75K a year, that's not going to stop you from being unhappy. Anyone can be unhappy at any wealth level, right? That's kind of the main takeaway. However, if you're happy, more money makes you happier. So that's one of the big things to take away. So if you're already happy, more money is going to make you happier. If you're poor, more money is probably going to make you happier. But if you aren't poor and you aren't happy, money's not going to help you. That's kind of the main takeaway.
Right. I think one of the biggest mistakes people make when it comes to investing is they withdraw their money when things are bad. Like when the markets go down, something happens. Obviously, you talk about just buying every month and not worrying about like what the market's doing necessarily, but like, what is your personal framework for not letting the noise like overwhelm you when stuff like the tariffs and stuff, is all over the news and you're like, oh my God, is the world ending?
Just got to know history. And I know, of course, at some point, the future is not going to be like the past, and that's true. But at the end of the day, like, we've had now, over 100 years of, U.S. stock market. We've had developed markets around the world for just about as long. And yes, there are markets that don't recover. There are markets that go through bad periods. You can look at Russia. You can look at Greece. Like there's examples where they don't recover. But if you own a diversified portfolio of world equities, like, you have built wealth over time, period. Like, any one region, even the US, could have a very bad long period, right? But I doubt that's going to be the case that the entire world is going to go through something like that. And if it does, oh my gosh, let's say there's a World War III, an actual nuclear war, it's chaos everywhere. Your investment portfolio is going to be the least of your worries. So it's not like, oh, I should have saved more cash. Like, your cash is going to be worth it. It's like all the worries. The only scenario where a globally diversified equity portfolio doesn't perform is the same scenario where your money's going to be the least of your worries anyway. So it's kind of an upside option, right? There's very little downside, except like in the downside scenario, it's not going to matter, right? What you did. So something to just keep in mind when you're thinking about that type of stuff. So
when it comes to like income levels, was there any like average income you saw when it came to people who were millionaires versus people who were like worth 10 million?
yep, that's in the book. So it's in chapter 2, I believe. Let me just find it real quick. I apologize.
That's all good.
Because yeah, I can give you the median income by within each wealth level basically, and I think that's gonna kind of get you what you want. So give me 1 second here.
Yeah, these stats in the book are crazy.
This is U.S. household income. So this is the median within each wealth level. So it's saying conditional on you having this level of wealth. What's the typical income? So level one, which is less than $10,000 in wealth, is $32,000. That's the median U.S. household income. I'm just going to round them because I mean it's $32,427, but I'm going to round all these. In level two, which is $10,000 to $100,000 in wealth, the median income is $48,000. In level three, it's $83,000 in income. In level four, which is someone with $1 to $10 million, the median income is $197,000. Okay. Level five, that's $10 million to $100 million in wealth. The median income is $724,000. And in level six, which is someone with over $100 million in wealth, the median income is $4.3 million. So just going through that quickly. Level one's 32,000. Level two is 48,000. Level three is 83,000. Level four is 197,000. Level five is 724,000, and level six is $4.3 million. That's crazy, right? When you think about it, how much it jumps up.
It's insane. Well, Nick, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, all your advice. I think the audience get a lot of value out of this. If people want to buy the book, where's the best place to do that? When's it come out, etc.?
Comes out July 22nd, and I'm guessing by now it should be out by now by the time it's released. So it's sold everywhere books are sold: Amazon, Target, Apple, like Barnes and Noble, Books a Million, Bookshop. All of those places will have it. So look for it anywhere.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming back on the show.
Thanks, Doug. Appreciate it.